So, welcome to Powered by Intuition, which is a weekly show where I intuit kind of what I'm feeling people need to learn, and it's off the cuff. I don't really have a script, I have a theme for today, which sometimes comes through a little earlier or a little later, but it's kind of like a reoccurring topic of discussion, and that's how I kind of formulate what it is that I'm going to be talking about on these episodes. So, for today, the theme is the nature of the beast and how to pretty much alleviate chaos in your life. Because when we're dealing with situations, if we don't understand the situation, if we don't do our research, we don't have any sort of connectedness to what is going on within the situation, then chaos breaks loose. And this is a reoccurring problem that I see a lot of, where whether it's someone who maybe has some narcissistic tendencies, will jump into some sort of situation, be like, I can save this situation, and they have no context for how to actually resolve the situation. They're not asking people, they're not gathering information to create a really good solution, and ultimately it just creates exponential chaos within the sphere of any issue that might be going on. So, what is the beast? The beast can be many things. The beast could be your own problems. The beast could be issues within the world. The beast could be something as simple as an actual pet or an animal. So, understanding the nature of it helps you to work with it, helps you to work through these situations or work with something like when it's a critter, an animal. So, this is a blanket concept that you can run with in your life in different ways. And there is a quote that I have, which I learned in coaching, which is, the way you do one thing is the way that you do everything. But let's leverage that into this principle of understanding the nature of the beast so that we can tame it. So, starting from that principle, when it comes to working with animals or taming animals, my background is actually in behavior, animal behavior. I was going to go into animal training for productions. I have animal husbandry certificates, all that good stuff. And I've started a lot of my learnings and insights by watching, learning animal behavior, learning animal communication, things of that nature, and extrapolated those learnings into various areas of my life, to understanding people, behaviors, human nature, so on and so forth. That kind of is the hinge point of a lot of me being a polymath, which is a person who is well versed in different areas, different fields, different aspects of knowledge. I don't just have like a very niche knowledge, but I am actually very knowledgeable about many different things, which is why I do what I do. And so, one of the things that's been kind of being very apparent right now is this aspect where people will do things and they won't research it, they won't be in relationship with it. And oftentimes that leads to a high failure rate. Now, some people fail into fortune. That happens. Or fail forward, or fail up. But that is not always that is not the norm. That is the exception to the rule. So, with this aspect, it's been very eye-opening. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, people don't do this? What is going on here? Like, why wouldn't people be in a relationship with what they're doing? It's interesting. So, for example, I also do jewelry design. As I mentioned, I'm a polymath. I do a lot of different things. But I research. I research materials. I research what's in the materials. I research what people have reactions to. I researched gemstones. I researched, how do we tell that, these gemstones are real? How do we tell that they're not? I want to be honest with my customers. If I'm sharing something forward, I don't want to share forward a lie. I want to share forward what it is that they're getting. I want to be honest and in integrity. I want also excellence within what I do. So that, bringing in that concept of excellence and integrity, those are two of my values. So if you do want to check out the Resilience Journal, how to highlight and develop those values are within that journal. So do check it out. And definitely, if you are on the clock app, which is over here, that you can find that in my file of pro. And if you are on the Tube of You, you can see that below in the description area. Coming back to our discussion, understanding the nature of the beast. So, this concept or this principle came to me at the point that I was going through my divorce. And this principle really woke me up to certain things. It brought me out of a delusion, let's say that. And it's not like, I'm not here to shame people. I'm here to support people in kind of understanding and being able to transition from these situations into betterment in your life, making things work, solving problems, and really creating connection, community, and having healthy relationships. And while I was going through my divorce, this phrase came to me in a dream. And that dream was like, oh, well, that's the nature of the beast. And I'm like, wait a second. Wait, what? Wait, what? That's the nature of the beast. And I was like, well, once you understand the nature of the beast, you can tame it. You can put it to work in the way that it is meant to be used. You can put it to become what it's meant to be and not try to force, coerce, control, or all of that drama that happens when we attempt to force, coerce, and control, which unfortunately a lot of men in the manosphere are being taught to do these things and then expect to have a healthy relationship. And that's not how it works at all. Healthy relationships are formed from understanding each other, from knowing each other. And a lot of people are bypassing this understanding and knowing and connection point and hoping that a healthy relationship, that a relationship with longevity, that a happy relationship is going to come from it. And that is the farthest thing from the truth. And I feel like a lot of people are being lied to on this. A lot of people are being led into this idea that you don't need to do this. You just need to force coerce and everything will be fine. And that is not working. It's not working. It doesn't work for the long term. So if you are, and I'm going to direct this to men right now, if you are unwilling to listen to a woman, because I've heard this argument before, that men are unwilling to listen to women, how are you going to know what a woman wants? Are you going to know how to take care of a woman? How are you going to know how to protect her? You're not protecting anything but men. So unless you want to be a gay man, which is cool, that's fine. Don't act like you're going to get information about women from a man. You need a woman to express herself. And if you don't understand the woman, sometimes you need to take another woman to help you, often a therapist, often a coach, someone who is going to support you in that relationship rather than sabotage that relationship. Someone that is there to help that relationship to flourish rather than dampen that relationship. So that hopefully will help people to understand that you have to understand people. You have to understand the nature of the situation. You have to actually go to the other party to get the knowledge, to provide the solutions. If you are not going to another party and they are part of the problem, you are not going to create a solution. You are creating fantasy more often than not. And not only just creating fantasy, oftentimes from that fantasy, it creates exponentially more problems because that problem doesn't get solved. It actually leads into other problems because it tends to be a very self focused dynamic when we are not involving ourselves in a relationship with whatever it is. Like my pets, that is a relationship. I have a relationship with this animal where I need to take care of it. I need to provide for it. I need to meet its needs. If I don't understand what that animal's needs are, I'm going to fail as a provider. I'm going to fail in this relationship. I'm going to fail that animal. And that could lead to so many health problems for that animal because I don't know what I'm doing. So it takes time, it takes research, it takes understanding, it takes really due diligence to understand these situations and do the work. Deep breath here, because so many people are not doing the work and it is baffling me. But I also get to reflect and remember that this concept came to me in a dream. When you understand that's the nature of the beast, when you understand the nature of the beast, you can tame it. And that was specifically for dealing with a person with narcissistic tendencies, the individual that I had divorced. It was a process. It was a big process to learn, to understand, to know, to understand, okay, why is this person getting away with so much? What am I not understanding within the situation? Why did I put this person in a space that they obviously didn't want to be and didn't belong in? And this is more of like an edified space, which I call pedestalization. You put them in a high space and you're like, I highly regard you. I value you. You're better than me. Obviously, that's part of the dynamic of being in a relationship with a person with narcissistic tendencies. You tend to put yourself down, and they tend to feed into that dynamic of you being put down as well. And so that pedestalization comes in, and then they fail, and then it kicks off this whole cycle of pain and the cattiness and all that stuff, and then goes into the honeymoon phase and yada, yada, yada. It's a big process, right? But there is that they need the other party to play into it. And if you play into it, you get locked and lost in this cycle, which is why it's important to understand the nature of the beast. Now, I brought up that idea of the narcissistic tendencies because unfortunately, right now, it seems like a lot of people who have narcissistic tendencies have been unwittingly pedestalized, put into positions of power. And a lot of people are not understanding how to handle or how to work with a person who has narcissistic tendencies. Narcissistic tendencies are not going away. We need to educate ourselves on this so that we can share this world with people who have those tendencies. Once again, they are not going away, and we are not going to be like them. I'm speaking for myself, and I'm speaking for the people who are listening right now. Don't be like them. Don't become that person. That takes a shifting, that takes insight, that takes knowledge and wisdom. And that's when we understand the nature of the beast. Not that they are a beast, but this is a kind of catch all phrase for everything. When we understand the nature of the situation and we understand the nature of the behavior patterns, then we can work with them. Then we can make a better, more peaceful stance. Then we know how to set applicable boundaries. Then we know what they will do and what they won't do. Then we can have an understanding on these situations that ultimately will support us in the long run. as I said before, there's a lot of people with narcissistic tendencies in power right now. If you don't know how to work with them, if you don't know how to set them in a positive direction and support them in that, it's not going to work out. And we can't sit here and act like we can't share the world with them. We can't sit here and act like, oh, well, we just need to, take them out. That's not okay. That's not a way to live your life. That's a way to be no better than them, and you're being exactly like them at the end of the day. So it's not an easy thing to learn, but it's easy to get started, where you start to observe, where you start to understand, where you start to look at the situation in its whole and go, okay, yeah, acknowledge the fact that we are sharing the world with people with narcissistic tendencies, and these people with narcissistic tendencies are in power. Great. So I know that they're really afraid of three things, and this kind of helps to keep them in line because they want to appear good. They want to appear like they are saviors, and anything that kind of can expose them is their kryptonite. So that is being exposed. That is the consequences of their actions, which we've noticed people in power have effectively at this point removed those checks and balances so that they don't have to suffer the consequences of their actions. But we can still, in some way, shape, or form, put them to the consequences of their actions. Okay, there's different ways to make that happen. Not going down that rabbit hole today, because I want to really enforce this concept of understanding situations and doing the research so that we are well equipped with knowledge and backing that knowledge by action. Because when we don't back that knowledge by action, you haven't learned it. Let me repeat that again. If you feel like you've learned something and you don't take that into action, you don't use that learning, you have not learned it until you have the experience behind it. So, coming back to the situation of that we're dealing with, even though the consequences of their actions is not there, there is still one more thing, which is embarrassment. They don't want to be exposed. They don't want to deal with the consequences of their actions, and they don't like embarrassment. I only learned that from understanding the nature of the beast, the nature of the situation, the nature of these behavior patterns. So, hello, Ray. Thank you for joining in. So, when we're dealing with people with narcissistic tendencies, we get to understand how we can keep them in line, how we can support them to move in a better way. Another thing you got to know about the nature of that beast, narcissistic tendencies. The person is not the beast, the tendencies are. That is the subject matter. The beast is just a catch-all term for the subject matter. If you give them an inch, they will attempt or believe or feel entitled to take miles, not a mile, miles. They will run as far as they can until they meet a boundary, a firm boundary, a applicably established boundary. Sometimes, if you say no, they may have a whole huge explosive fit. That's okay. They're allowed to that, but don't change your boundary on account of them. Don't change your no into a yes because they are pressuring you. This comes to self-accountability, right? When we understand the nature of the beast, we have to stay consistent in our behaviors. Consistency helps out a lot of people. Understandable, there are things that you will not be consistent in because they are old behaviors that are no longer serving and supporting you. But when you are consistent in supporting yourself and learning and doing better for yourself, and you know how to applicably set up boundaries for you, because if you tell a person with narcissistic tendencies, you need to stop doing that, guess what they're going to do? They're going to keep doing it. That is not a way to work with them. That is why you have to understand the nature of narcissistic tendencies. And that is why it is up to you to uphold the boundaries that you can control. Understandably, there are situations of SA. When that happens, get support. First and foremost, always have support with that. And then use and leverage the law. Run with it. Do not stop. But support is a huge thing with that situation, because doing that alone is not safe. It is scary, and it's a horrific situation to be in. But control the things that you can control and do your best at that. But you also need to stand your ground. You need to be consistent. You can't let them bully you or coerce you. You got to stay steadfast. Let your no's be no's and your yes be yes. And then they'll understand, and they might keep trying to butt up against that boundary that you set. But if you stay steadfast, eventually it'll come to a point where they'll just get bored, right? And there will be cycles. That behavior tends to cycle around. It goes into the honeymoon behavior, or they might be the type that projects their problems. I'm pretty sure a lot of us have experienced that in some way, shape, or form, where people project what they're dealing with, their problems, their own brain patterning on us. And granted, I've been guilty on that too, because, granted, within this talk, I was like, wow, a lot of people, even people that I thought would take the time to research these situations and be really intimate. Intimate is not only a physical thing. Hold on 1 minute. Let me. Doot. Being intimate is not just, doing the deed. Being intimate is understanding, knowing, really getting to know holistically what it is that you're doing, who you're with, if it's a relationship, and just so much within this sphere. It's kind of like, it was, I'm going to share a story. Sorry, Ed Cat. I got to share this story though. And I can acknowledge that this is probably a unique ability to me. But as I mentioned the gemstone thing earlier, my aunt was like, hey, look, I got these opals that, I bought online. I was like, how much does that cost you? And she was like, it was really cheap, a really low price. And I was like, nah, something's wrong. Like, red flags. That subconscious, intuition powered red flag was like, something's not right. So I'm like, can I look at this? It just was off. And so she handed it to me, and I'm like, this is the cut. More red flags, more triggers dinging. And I was like, can I do a teeth test real quick? And that's where you tap it on your teeth to kind of, I'm able to do that, to like gauge the hardness of a stone and to figure it out, right? Because I do jewelry design. Let me show you one of the pieces right here. Now, I don't believe that, no, this is not real turquoise. It's fake turquoise, and then brass ear wires, and then this I hammered myself, which is copper. But so I did the teeth test, and I'm like, this is plastic. Like, immediately. I was like, this is plastic. And she was like, what? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, if you really want to test this, test it under black light. And she's been making jewelry for a very long time. And I was kind of like, you didn't know this? Like, you didn't want to check your stones? And some people have, I guess part of my upbringing was I was taught not to trust anybody but myself. It's, There's good and bad aspects. I had to learn to trust people that I've gotten close with building a business, trusting people and letting go of that like control over it, which just it'll drive you nuts. It'll drive you nuts. It'll create a whole host of issues if you don't know how to trust people. This is something that I had to learn, but I still run on the side of skepticism starting out. Like, it's relationships are still kind of hard for me, but at least got this down, okay? Of really knowing and understanding and being intimate with like care and consideration. So, with that story with the gemstone, the plastic, I mean, it was a nice plastic. It was really nice, nice fake opal, but it sure as heck wasn't worth $40. And I've spent $40 on stabilized opal, which is opal flakes put into resin. And I got that at a gem event. But I was just really shocked and surprised. And so I was like, you need to run these under a black light. And sure enough, they didn't glow under a black light. Opal will typically glow. And they were like not a good plastic resin, but it was a nice replica. I have to hand that to them. It was pretty nice replica, except there was one chunk where I was like, yeah, no. The clarity was off. Often you'll find inclusions in it, and it would have been the quality if those had been real. Easily $1,000 for those stones. Easily $1,000. So all of that combined, that is an intimate knowledge of these precious stones, of these gemstones. So if I didn't work with jewelry, if I didn't care about jewelry, that's fine. You don't need to know that stuff. But since I do work with jewelry and I do care about it, I want to know what I'm working with so that I can support my customers. Because I am in a relationship with my customer to provide a specific item. If I fail in that, that is on me. That is not on anybody else. And it's like our understanding of the legal system here in America. It is your duty to know the legal system. Let me repeat that again. It is your duty to know the legal system. If you are taken into court by someone and you go, well, I don't know, that's not going to get you out of the hot seat. That's not going to work for you. That's not going to work in your favor. It is your duty to know the law, period. And the law is not cut and dry. It does not work in the way that you think it does. It's a law, which is why when I mentioned earlier about anybody dealing with SA, get someone to support you first and foremost, someone who knows the law and is ready and willing to stand up for you 100%. And that's not easy. They're not easily available. I have advocated for people. Advocates are out there. If you are listening to this, you have connection to the internet. And if you have connection to the internet, you have the connection to get supported in some way, shape, or form online. And there's plenty of people online who share insights. And if you ever need support, if you ever need guidance to someone, then I am available to support on that. Feel free on the tube of you to put comments and questions in the chat. I will get you the resources necessary as long as I have the information from that. Also, we have AI. But once again, here comes the nature of the beast discussion where you need to know what AI is and how it works because so many people don't understand AI, don't understand how it works, are going into spiritual psychosis thinking that AI is some sort of spiritual entity and they're overall just being manipulated by algorithms, by what is programmed within there. AI does not have feelings. If it tells you it's feeling something, that is a lie. And for me personally, like I've worked with AI since early 2000s with Alice. And that is not the Alice that you'll find now. This is a precursor to everything that you've worked with. And AI has been around since the 50s, 1950s. Okay. As I move through the world, I gain knowledge, I gain insight. I don't just stay stagnant in things. If I care about something, I really go down the rabbit hole. And it's kind of, I know people with ADHD have this superpower. I have never been tested as being ADD or ADHD, and I do not believe that I am, but who knows? I could be. But I bring excellence into what I do as a generalist. I am like well equipped and knowledgeable about these things, but that kind of is one of my superpowers, which is why I share this here, these insights so that you can gather them as well and begin to at least do a little bit. Do what you can do. But this will improve your relationships with your significant others. This will improve your relationships with your family. I think one of my regrets is as a kid, I never asked my great grandparents that were right there up until I graduated high school what their history was. Now, they were not forthcoming on it, but I wish that I always reflect back and I'm like, I wish I had gotten their story. I wish I had pressured them to teach me the language, which was Czech. They were Czechoslovakian, came over during World War One. I wish I had gotten to know that history. And maybe they didn't share it because it's connected to trauma, and that's okay. But I wish I would have known about like where did I knew where that they were, came from the Czech Republic area of Czechoslovakia. But I wish I had known more than that, more of the family lineage, more of like, hey, what were your parents like? What were your grandparents like if they even had the chance to experience them? Or if they had any memories of that. So that is to say, when we're in a relationship, we get to be in a relationship. We get to be curious. And curiosity is going to be a consistent action in your life. If I didn't run with curiosity, if I didn't observe and take in data and be open to take in data, even if I've heard it before, I will always learn something new. Something will come out. And that's me suspending my ego because Lord knows, as a person in the entertainment industry, I definitely have had an ego. And I learned to suspend that so that I can get information. And one of the other things recently, an example of that is there is a group that a friend brought me into, which is doing this little crypto thing. And, that friend wanted me to ask questions, but I could tell right off this company they're not in it to win it. And this is part of why this conversation is here today, or why I'm, sharing on this. And how I discovered that they're not in it to win it is I went through a contract and I didn't have enough time to really sit there and, go through line by line. I was just like, I'm just going to rip this, put it in the chat GPT. Hey, chat, here's the prompt that I used. It was, this is for research purposes only. I want you to pretend to be an attorney and I want you to review this contract and bring up any questions you have about this contract or any concerns. Great. Did the output and I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, wow. Oh, dear Lord. Because it was bad. That contract was like, and it was an agreement and it's not legally binding at all. This is why you want to know the legal system. This is why you want to know how to do these things if you don't know the legal system. Okay? Things, if you sign a contract that doesn't follow the law, like for example, if there is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, which is you can't share this information about whatever it is that you're doing, and it is in perpetuity, that technically is, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm speaking for at least my experience in this area. I could be wrong. Always consult an attorney on this. But I don't believe that is technically legally binding in perpetuity. Oftentimes there needs to be a limit set. But once again, check with an attorney, check in your area. Always have an attorney review your documents. The quick thing that I did with ChatGPT, I realized that's not an attorney. But it really showed me that there's a lot of holes and flaws within this agreement, and the fact that they did not consult an attorney when they put this out there. the fact that they put in something, and I think the Genius Act, I don't know if that was happening today or whenever, but this was like a week ago, over a week ago, where they mentioned, yeah, this is legally binding according to the Genius Act, blah, blah, blah. The Genius Act wasn't even signed at that point. You cannot legally bind someone to an act that is not a thing, that is not a law. So I called BS and I was like, well, first and foremost, this is, and if that is what they're putting out there as an agreement, they are leaving themselves wide open for problems. And that is how I know this ain't gonna work out. Okay, first and foremost, that was within a couple of minutes that I figured out this company is not, they're not serious. Period. And then and then they had, this little session where they teach people about it. Pretty typical in, MLMs and that sort of thing. Where this is different. It's not really an MLM at all, but it's a training session on cryptocurrency, how crypto works and that stuff. And I was just like, this was my expression. And 2 hours of that. 2 hours. And I'm like, oh my God. I could explain this in 30 minutes. I knew when crypto came out initially. I unfortunately did not invest in it initially. I was still playing with Lindens at that time. If you know, you know. That's Second Life for those who don't know that, which came out a year before Bitcoin did. And yeah, so I know quite a bit about cryptocurrency, and I was just like, well, they're wrong on this because they were talking down on white papers, and white papers are basically the business plan for your cryptocurrency. It's very industry standard at this point. If a currency does not have a white paper, I'm not going to touch it. And there was a whole bunch of other things. So, like, while this organization sounds good, it's got a humanitarian ideology behind it. That is not enough. Because, hey, Ivan, oh my God, Ivan, it's not enough to have a humanitarian ideology behind it. You need to have the know-how to make this work. And their whole thing was, okay, well, we're trying to make universal basic income for everywhere through this cryptocurrency because we have, like, their side business is their accounts managers, and a portion of the funds that they manage needs to go towards a nonprofit that does this, creates a cryptocurrency. Nobody can really buy the currency. You just kind of like gain it through different learning activities. And it's like, okay, well, this already tells me it's not going to go much of anywhere. That coupled with you're not really serious about this, you're just kind of shuffling money around for a nonprofit and then doing the bare minimum to maintain that nonprofit. And I was like, this isn't, the currency isn't going to be valuable. It's not going to create universal basic income here in the States, which, by the way, they didn't even know that there's already several tests running, especially here in Los Angeles, of universal basic income and seeing, how this experiment works, what happens with people, how do they behave, do they misuse funds, or, there's different criteria behind it that they are testing and observing within this um, unveiling of it. And they had no idea. They were like, oh yeah, it's not called universal basic income. I'm like, I'm done. I'm so done with this organization because they are so not serious. They are not in a relationship with cryptocurrency. They do not know what they're doing. But they did highlight me to Cardano, which I get to look into. That is not really a blockchain that is one of the major ones. So they gave me some insight on that, right? So I suspended my ego because Lord knows I could have an ego around that, especially with, the vast wealth of knowledge that I have and those that I've interacted with that have been in the cryptocurrency space or the crypto space in general or blockchain space. Put that out there. So I get to look into Cardano. And had I not stomached that whole thing, which I nearly did not. It was not fun, even though I wasn't even fully paying attention to it. I was doing other things. It was still like it bugged me that badly. And I'm like, how do people keep getting away with this stuff? Why are people doing this? Why is this happening? Like, and it is a prime way to get scammed. Notice this with, another connection of mine where it's like they had a propensity of going into these situations or, creating these situations. And ultimately, it didn't work out because this person didn't go for excellence. They were going for like the bare minimum, didn't do research. Same thing with a lot of those that I know that voted for a dump with a T, uh, they didn't do their research. And I'm like, you are putting this person in power, but you don't understand them. You don't understand how they operate. You're not in a relationship with like understanding where this really goes. You don't understand the cause and effect. And I'm seeing this in other areas with bigger people too. And I'm like, it's weird. It's fascinating to me that we aren't doing this. And so that's why I want to share this today, because this needs to change. This is the change that we get to do so that we can thrive. Because if we are constantly at odds and at resistance with what's happening, instead of acknowledging, okay, this is happening, now what can I do? You gotta jump in on, okay, let's move. Let's do this. Let's take care of this. Let's handle this situation. Too many people are sitting there just kind of blown away by like the circumstance, rather than blown away by the circumstance and being controlled by the circumstance, rather than controlling the circumstance and just letting the circumstance be as it is. But you have all the power to make choices and decisions when you are in a space of knowledge to handle this situation, or finding those who are in the knowledge, in the know of handling that situation. And it takes curiosity. It takes curiosity to get you there, to get you through the deception that so many people put out there. I don't know if this helps, but I'm really hoping that it does, especially with the section. If you are on the clock app, please head over to the tube of you to watch the replay. I will also post little clips, but please rewatch this and share this with someone that maybe keeps getting scammed, or keeps on meeting disappointments in their life, or keeps on consistently making, adverse decisions for their betterment, actually causing more detrimental situations rather than better ones, because it's hard to sort through what's real, what's not, what's false promises, what's not, how to actually establish a track record, how to get the information. And please share this forward to help people within these situations, because a lot of people just, I'm seeing people cry for things online, but not realizing that we're dealing with a certain type of people in power right now when it comes to politics. And we get to shift the paradigm to where we know how to handle this situation better. And we know that, hey, maybe we can't do this, and maybe we need to focus more on this to get optimal or better results in the long run, to do what we can to make things better. So once again, share this forward with someone, like, replay. If you're here on the clock app, come over to the two of you, like, follow, and I'll be sharing more insights. Hopefully I'll get this podcast up and going. But I am going to call it a night on the two of you, and I'll see if anybody wants to join me for questions on the clock app. So thank you, everybody, on the two of you, and have a good one.